I never expected her to remember my name, let alone the way I took my coffee, or the fact that I always hesitated before saying goodbye, like I was waiting for someone to stop me. It started on a Tuesday that didn't feel important. The kind of day where the sky looks washed out, and your phone stays quiet for so long you start checking it just to feel something in your hand. I was at this small cafe near the hospital, the one interns and nurses always crowded into like it was part of the building. The chairs were mismatched. The music was always too low to enjoy, but loud enough to stop you from thinking. I sat in the same corner as usual, back against the wall, laptop open, pretending I was studying. In reality, I was just killing time. I'd already sent a "you good" text to my friend Ayan that morning. He hadn't replied. He usually didn't. That was kind of his thing lately, existing without actually being reachable. I stared at the message for a few seconds, then turned my screen off like it was embarrassing to be seen trying. That's when I saw her. She walked in like she belonged there. Not loud, not trying, just steady, mid-40s, maybe older. Hair tied back in a loose bun like she'd done it without looking. No makeup that I could notice, but her face still had this calm sharpness, like she'd learned how to carry exhaustion without letting it win. She wore hospital scrubs under a long coat, and she looked like someone who'd been on her feet all day but still refused to slouch. I recognized her immediately, not because she was famous or anything, because she was Ayan's mom. I met her once before, months ago at their house. I'd gone over to drop off Ayan's charger and stayed too long because his dad wasn't home and the silence in that place fell heavy. She'd offer me tea like it was nothing, like I was already part of their routine. Back then, I'd only noticed her in a normal way. Now, I noticed everything. The way she held her phone but didn't look at it. The way her eyes scanned the room like she was checking if anyone needed something. Then her gaze landed on me. For a second, I thought she wouldn't recognize me. That she'd just look away politely like adults do when they see someone younger and vaguely familiar. But she didn't. Her expression changed slightly. Just the smallest shift. Like she'd found something she hadn't expected. "You're Ayan's friend," she said. Her voice was softer than I remembered. Low, controlled. The kind of voice that didn't waste words. I sat up without meaning to. "Yeah, yes. I'm Zayan." She blinked once. "Zayan." She said my name like she'd been saving it somewhere. It shouldn't have done anything to me, but it did. I nodded, suddenly aware of my hands. I started folding the corner of a napkin on the table, creasing it, smoothing it out, then creasing it again. She stepped forward, not rushing, and stood beside my table like it was normal. "How's your training going?" she asked. I let out a quiet laugh. Not because it was funny, more like because it was easier than saying the truth. "It's going," I said. "Mostly feels like I'm running around holding papers and pretending I know what I'm doing." That made her mouth twitch, almost a smile. "Sounds accurate," she said. I didn't expect her to sit, but she did. Not fully comfortable either. Just for a moment, like she was giving herself permission to rest. Her hands wrapped around her coffee cup. I found myself staring at them. Not in a creepy way, just noticing how steady they were. Like hands that had held too many things together. I looked away quickly. She noticed anyway. "How's Ayan?" I asked. Something passed through her eyes. A shadow, quick and practiced. "He's fine," she said, but her voice didn't match the words. I nodded like I believed it. We sat there for a few seconds, silence between us. Not awkward exactly, just quiet. The kind of quiet that makes you hear the clink of spoons, the espresso machine, the ticking clock above the counter. I realized I liked it. I liked not having to perform. She took a sip of her coffee, then glanced at me again. "You always sit in this corner?" she asked. "Yeah," I admitted. "It's less noisy here. Or less lonely," she said. That hit too close. I swallowed, eyes dropping to the table. She didn't apologize. She didn't soften it. She just let the words hang there like they belonged. Then her phone buzzed. She checked it once, then locked it again without replying. I watched her do it, and I felt something twist in my chest. The familiar feeling of being someone who waits for messages that never come. She stood up, pulling her coat closer around her shoulders. "Well," she said quietly, "it was good seeing you, Zion." "Yeah," I said. "You too." She started to walk away, then paused, just one step from leaving. She turned her head slightly, like she was deciding whether to say something. Then she did. "If Ayan asks," she said, voice almost a whisper, "you can't tell him you were here." He stared at her, confused. "What?" I asked, but she was already walking out. And before the cafe door even fully closed behind her, my phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. "Don't go home yet." I stared at the message for a full 10 seconds, like it might change if I blinked hard enough. "Don't go home yet." No name, no emoji, no explanation. Just that. My first thought was Ayan. Maybe he finally decided to be dramatic for once. But the number wasn't saved, and something about the timing felt too clean. I glanced toward the cafe door. She was already gone. Outside, the street looked normal. Cars moving. People walking like their lives made sense. The world didn't pause just because my chest suddenly felt tight. I should have ignored it. I should have packed my bag and gone back to the hospital dorms and eaten instant noodles like every other night. Instead, I stayed. Because if I'm being honest, I wanted it to be her. I sat there pretending to scroll, but my eyes kept drifting to the window. Every time someone walked past, my heart did this stupid little jump, like it was auditioning for something. 5 minutes passed, then 10. I started to feel stupid, like I'd been invited into a conversation that didn't actually include me. Then my phone buzzed again. "Come outside, just for a minute." This time, I stood up so fast my chair scraped the floor. I grabbed my jacket and walked out, the cold air hitting my face like a slap. I scanned the sidewalk, expecting nothing. But she was there, standing a few steps away near a street lamp, half in shadow. Ayan's mom. She wasn't in her coat anymore. Just scrubs, sleeves rolled slightly, like she'd stopped caring how tired she looked. Her hair was messier than before, and she held her phone loosely in her hand. When she saw me, she didn't smile, but her shoulders relaxed. "You actually came," she said. I shrugged, trying to act casual even though my pulse was embarrassing. "You told me not to go home." She nodded once, like that was fair. Then she looked away, staring at the street like she was watching something only she could see. "I shouldn't have done that," she murmured. "Texted me." "No," she said softly. "Recognized you." That made me laugh under my breath, but it wasn't a happy sound. "Why?" I asked. She hesitated. A long pause. Then she said, "Because Ayan doesn't know I come here." I frowned. Why wouldn't he? Her jaw tightened slightly. She pressed her thumb against the edge of her phone screen, not scrolling, just rubbing it like a nervous habit. "He thinks I'm always fine," she said. "Mothers are supposed to be fine." Something about that sentence felt heavier than it should have. I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. We stood there, two people under a street lamp, pretending it wasn't strange. Then she looked at me again. "You're doing your internship at the hospital, right?" she asked. "Yeah." "You must be exhausted." I gave a half smile. That's the official job description. That finally got a small smile out of her. It didn't reach her eyes, but existed. And somehow that felt like a gift. She exhaled slow. "I used to think exhaustion was temporary," she said. "Like, you get through a hard year, and then life becomes normal again." Her voice was calm, but her words weren't. "And?" I asked. She looked down at her hands. "Turns out some tiredness just becomes part of you." I swallowed. It felt like she just handed me something private, like a photograph she didn't show anyone. I wanted to ask if she was okay, but you don't ask someone like her that. Not directly. People like her are trained to dodge questions with practice smiles. So instead I said, "You don't seem like the type who lets life win." She let out a small breath, almost a laugh. "You're young," she said. "You still believe people win." That hit me in a place I didn't know was soft. I watched her face, the faint lines near her eyes, the quiet strength in the way she stood. She wasn't trying to be beautiful. That's what made it worse. And then my brain, like an idiot, imagined her in other places, sitting across from me in a kitchen, laughing at something stupid I said, falling asleep on a couch while a movie played. I hated myself for imagining it, because she wasn't just a woman. She was my friend's mother. She was off limits in a way that wasn't even spoken. It was understood like gravity. She glanced at the cafe window, then back at me. "If Ayan ever asks," she said again, softer this time, "you weren't here." "Okay." I nodded. "Okay." She stepped closer, just enough that I could smell coffee and something clean, hospital soap maybe. Then she reached out. Not dramatic, just her fingers brushing my sleeve near my wrist. A small adjustment, like she was fixing a wrinkle. But her touch lingered a second too long. Her eyes lifted to mine, and she said, almost like a joke, almost like a warning, you should go home before you start getting ideas. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. And maybe because I saw her too. After that night, I told myself it was a one-time thing. A weird coincidence. A tired woman stepping outside of her own life for a minute, then returning like nothing happened. That's what adults did, right? They had moments. Then they swallowed them. But the next day, when I walked into the hospital, I saw her again. Not in a cafe. Not under a street lamp. In a hallway outside Ward C, holding a clipboard like it weighed nothing. She didn't look surprised. That was the part that unsettled me. Like she'd known I'd be there. Like she'd already placed me into her routine without asking permission. Her eyes met mine for half a second. Then she looked away. Not cold. Not rude. Just careful. As if she was drawing a line in invisible ink. I kept walking, but my chest didn't. It stayed back there with her. For the rest of the shift, I caught glimpses of her everywhere, speaking to nurses, adjusting in four-line, checking a patient's chart. Calm, efficient, untouchable. And every time she turned a corner, my brain followed, like a dog that had learned its owner's footsteps. That evening, I was in the break room staring at a vending machine that didn't work when Ayan finally texted me. Ayan, bro, you a hospital. I stared at the message, thumb hovering. I could have said no. I could have lied. Instead, I typed, yeah. A second later, Ayan good. Mom's been weird lately. She didn't even answer my call last night. My stomach tightened. I reread the message twice, like maybe I'd misunderstood it. He didn't know. Of course he didn't. And suddenly, the memory of her saying you can't tell him you were here didn't feel like a request. It felt like a warning. I shoved my phone in my pocket and walked out, heart beating too loud in my ears. I found her near the nurse's station. She was alone for once, writing something down. Her pen moved smoothly, like her hand had never trembled in her life. I slowed down without meaning to. She sensed me before I spoke. She always did. Her eyes lifted. Zion, she said quietly, like my name was a secret. I stopped a few feet away. You're here, I said. It sounded stupid the second it left my mouth. She nodded. I work here. Yeah, I know. Silence. Not awkward. Worse. Charged. She glanced around, then lowered her voice. You shouldn't be standing here. Why? I asked. She looked back down at her clipboard. People talk. I didn't move. She exhaled, slow, like she was trying to calm herself down more than me. You're Ayan's friend, she said. You're young. You're not part of my life. I felt something in my throat tighten. I wasn't trying to be, I said. You texted me. Her pen stopped. For a second, she didn't write, didn't breathe. Then she said, almost under her breath, I shouldn't have. That was it. No apology. No explanation. Just a quiet retreat. And somehow that hurt more than if she'd yelled at me. I watched her hands. The way her fingers gripped the pen harder than necessary. The way her knuckles looked pale. She wasn't unaffected. She was fighting it. That thought did something to me. Before I could stop myself, I stepped closer. Just one step. I'm not asking for anything, I said. I don't know. It felt like you were the first person in a long time who didn't look at me like I was still a kid. Her eyes lifted again. This time she didn't look away. She looked straight at me, and the tiredness in her face was suddenly obvious. Like the hospital lights were too bright to hide it. You don't understand, she whispered. Then tell me. She shook her head. Small movement. Almost nothing. But her voice cracked a little when she said, if I let myself talk to you the way I want to, I won't stop. My heart stuttered. I didn't know what to do with that sentence. It landed between us like broken glass. Behind her, someone laughed in the hallway. A cart rolled past. Normal sounds. Normal life. But her eyes didn't move from mine. She set the clipboard down slowly, like it was suddenly too heavy. Then she stepped closer too. Close enough that I could see the faint crease between her brows. Close enough that I could feel the heat of her presence. Her voice was barely there. Go away, she said. But she didn't move. She didn't step back. Her hand rose, hesitant, and her fingers brushed the edge of my ID badge hanging from my neck, just touching it like she needed proof I was real. My breath caught. I should have stepped back. Instead, I leaned in. Not fully. Just enough. Her eyes flicked down to my mouth. And for a second, the space between us wasn't a hallway. It was a decision. Then footsteps. Fast. Ayan's voice, calling out from behind me. Zion. Bro. Her hand dropped instantly. Her face changed like a switch flipped, professional, distant, controlled. And I turned around, feeling my whole body still leaning toward her, even though she was already gone. Ayan walked up, grinning, completely unaware. Man, what you doing here? He asked. I opened my mouth to answer, but all I could think about was how close her lips had been, how close I'd been to ruining everything, and how part of me still wanted to. The next few days felt like living beside a fire and pretending I didn't feel the heat. Ayan kept showing up more often. He started taking his breaks where I took mine. He talked more, joked more, like he was trying to fix something in himself by being louder. And his mom, her, became quieter, not cold, just sealed. Whenever I passed her in the corridor, she'd acknowledge me the way you acknowledge a stranger you've met once at a wedding. A polite nod, a quick glance, nothing more. But I noticed things. The way her eyes lingered when she thought I wasn't looking. The way her shoulders stiffened when Ayan stood too close to her. The way she kept her hands busy, always holding something, adjusting something, wiping something down like stillness was dangerous. I started to hate myself for wanting her attention. And I started to hate Ayan for having it. It wasn't rational. It wasn't fair. But it was there. That Friday, I was finishing paperwork at the nurse's station when I heard her voice. Calm, professional, but softer than usual. I glanced up and saw her talking to another intern, a guy from my batch named Horace. Tall, confident, the type who always laughed like the world belonged to him. She was explaining something about a patient file. He leaned in too close, smiling like he didn't care who noticed. And she didn't step away. She didn't smile either, but she didn't shut it down. Maybe she didn't even realize what it looked like. Or maybe she did. Something bitter rose in my throat. A stupid, ugly feeling. Jealousy, probably. Or maybe just fear. Fear that she could replace me that easily. Fear that I'd imagine the whole thing. I looked down at my papers and forced myself to breathe. But my hand was shaking slightly, and I hated that too. Later, when my shift ended, I found myself outside the hospital without thinking. The evening air was cool, the sky turning dull blue like it was tired of being bright. I walked toward the side entrance where staff smoked and waited for rides. And there she was, sitting alone on the low concrete ledge near the back parking lot, coat draped over her arm, coffee cup in her hand like a habit she couldn't quit. She looked up when I approached. Her eyes narrowed slightly. You're off duty, she said. So are you, I replied. She didn't answer, just looked away, staring at the parking lot. I sat down a few feet from her, leaving space like I was supposed to. For a while, we said nothing. Cars passed. A distant ambulance siren faded into the city. Somewhere behind us, the hospital doors opened and closed. Normal life. But the silence between us wasn't normal. It felt like a hell breath. Finally, she spoke. I saw you today, she said. I nodded. I saw you too. Her fingers tightened around the cup. She didn't look at me when she asked, do you enjoy making things difficult? I blinked. What? She let out a quiet laugh that didn't sound amused. You stand near me like you don't care, she said. Like you don't understand what you're doing. I stared at her, confused and suddenly angry. I wasn't doing anything, I said. You were the one. I stopped, because I didn't know how to finish that sentence without crossing a line. She turned her head then, slowly. Her eyes met mine. Without even trying, she whispered, you make me feel visible. That word again. Visible. Like she'd been invisible for years, and I'd accidentally looked straight at her. I swallowed hard. My throat felt dry. I didn't mean to, I said. Yes, you did, she said quietly. You just didn't think it would work. Her voice trembled slightly on the last word. She looked away again, jaw tight, like she was holding herself together with her teeth. Then she said something I didn't expect. I'm not a good person to want, she murmured. I laughed under my breath, bitter. That's funny, I said. because you're the only person who's made me feel like I'm not just passing through life. Her shoulders dropped, like she'd been carrying a weight, and my words made it heavier. She closed her eyes for a second. When she opened them, they were wet, not crying, not falling apart, just close. "You're Ion's friend," she said again, like repeating it could undo what was happening. "I know. I'm older than you. I know. I'm tired," she said, voice breaking. "I'm so tired, Zion." That did it. Something in me cracked open. Without thinking, I shifted closer. Not touching, just nearer. Her breath hitched. She didn't move away. She stared at me like she was standing at the edge of something deep. And then, so softly I almost didn't hear it, she said, "Today, when I was talking to Horace, you looked at me like you hated me." I froze. I didn't deny it, because it was true, and she knew it. Her fingers trembled as she reached up and brushed the side of my jaw. Not fully touching, just hovering, like she was afraid her hand would burn. Her voice was barely there. "Tell me what you want," she whispered. My heart slammed against my ribs. I leaned in, my lips a breath away from hers, my whole body screaming yes. And in that suspended second, with the hospital lights behind her and the night swallowing the parking lot, I realized the real question wasn't whether I wanted her. It was whether she wanted to ruin her life for me, and whether I was selfish enough to let her. Because her mouth was close. So close. And she didn't pull away. Not yet. Not until I answered. The next morning, I woke up with the taste of her question still in my mouth. "Tell me what you want." It kept replaying in my head while I brushed my teeth, while I tied my shoes, while I stood in the elevator with strangers pretending we were all normal. I didn't even know what my answer would have been. All I knew was that I'd almost leaned in, and she hadn't stopped me. At the hospital, I kept looking for her without meaning to. It was pathetic, like my body had decided she was part of the building now. Like she belonged in the hallways the same way the disinfectant smell did. But she wasn't there. Not at the nurse's station. Not outside Ward C. Not in the break room. I asked one of the nurses casually, trying to sound like I didn't care. Where's Supervisor Farah today?" The nurse glanced at me, then looked away too quickly. "Didn't you hear?" she said. "Hear what?" "She took emergency leave. She left early last night." My stomach tightened. I didn't reply. Just nodded like it was normal news. But it wasn't, because last night, she'd been right there. Her hand near my face. Her breath in the cold air. And now she'd vanished like it never happened. I tried to text her. I stared at the message box for a long time, thumb hovering. "Are you okay?" Too obvious. "Where are you?" Too demanding. Did I do something? Too humiliating. I typed and erased the same sentence 5 times until my screen went dark. By afternoon, Ion cornered me in the cafeteria. He looked more awake than usual, like something had finally shaken him out of his own fog. "Bro," he said, sitting across from me. "You know my mom, right?" My heartbeat stuttered. I kept my face blank. "Yeah, obviously." He leaned forward. His voice dropped. "She left last night." Like just left. I frowned, forcing the confusion. "Left where?" Ion ran a hand through his hair, irritated. "I don't know. She didn't tell me. She didn't tell anyone. She just texted me that she needed space and turned her phone off." He laughed once, but it sounded broken. "She's never done that. Not once. Not even when my dad—" He stopped. His eyes flicked away, like he'd accidentally stepped too close to something sharp. I stared at him. "What about your dad?" I asked carefully. Ion's jaw tightened. "He's not around much anymore," he said. "They're still married on paper. But he basically lives somewhere else. Comes home when he feels like it. Acts like we're furniture." I didn't know what to say, because suddenly her tiredness made sense. Not just physical tiredness. The kind that comes from being needed by people who don't notice you're disappearing. Ion swallowed hard. "She didn't even tell me goodbye," he muttered. "And she always tells me goodbye." I nodded slowly, pretending I was processing it like a friend should. But inside, all I could hear was her voice from the parking lot. "I'm so tired, Zion." And I wondered if she'd been tired of me too. That night, I found myself back at the cafe. Same corner seat. Same quiet music. Same stupid napkins. I ordered coffee even though I didn't want it. I just wanted to sit somewhere that still felt connected to her. I checked my phone. Nothing. No message. No missed call. I opened her chat. the unsaved number. I typed, "Did you mean what you said?" Then I stared at it until the words started to feel embarrassing. I deleted it. I typed again, "I'm sorry." Deleted. Then, "I won't tell Ayan. I promise." Deleted. My fingers hovered above the screen, useless. Outside the cafe window, the street lamp glowed the same way it had the first night. But she wasn't there. I waited anyway, like an idiot. An hour passed. Then two. The barista wiped tables, glancing at me like I was the last customer in a story that should have ended already. Finally, I stood up and walked out. The cold at my face, sharp and clean. I looked toward the spot near the street lamp. Empty. I walked closer anyway, as if she might appear if I stood in the right place long enough. But there was nothing, just silence, and my own breath. I pulled my phone out one more time, opened the message thread, and typed a final line. "If you ever want to talk, I'm here." My thumb hovered over send. For a moment, I could almost feel her fingers brushing my jaw again. Then I locked my screen and slipped the phone back into my pocket. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. 3 days passed. No text. No accidental wasiting. No quiet nod from across the nurse's station. It was like she'd been erased from my week. Ayan kept spiraling in his own way, angrier than sad, like anger was easier to carry. He blamed his dad. He blamed work. He blamed the hospital. He even blamed me once, jokingly, for being too calm, like calmness was suspicious. I let him, because what was I supposed to say? Your mother almost asked me to ruin her life. On the fourth night, I was in my dorm room, sitting on the edge of my bed with my shoes still on, staring at the wall like it had answers. My phone buzzed. Unknown number. One line. "Call me. Please." No location. But I knew. I didn't even think. I grabbed my jacket and left. Ayan's house was quiet when I got there. The porch light was on, but dim. Like someone had turned it on out of habit, not hope. I stood at the gate for a second, my hand on the metal latch. My heart was pounding, so hard it felt childish. Then I walked in. The front door wasn't fully closed, just pulled shut enough to look like it was. I knocked anyway. Once. Twice. And then she opened it. She looked different. Not dressed up. Not trying. Just a plain sweater. Hair down. No bun. No armor. Her face looked bare in a way that felt too personal to witness. Her eyes met mine and held. For a second, neither of us spoke. Then she stepped back slightly, making space. "Come in," she said. Her voice was quiet, almost hoarse. I walked inside. The house smelled like tea and something warm, cinnamon maybe. It felt strange, being here without Ayan. Like walking into someone else's life through a side door. She closed the door behind me, and the click of the lock sounded louder than it should have. We stood in the hallway. She folded her arms, then unfolded them, like she couldn't decide what to do with her own body. "Ayan's not here," she said quickly. "He's staying at a friend's." I nodded. "Okay." Silence again. It wasn't the same silence as the hospital. This one felt exposed, like we were both standing without our uniforms on. She swallowed, eyes dropping to the floor. "I left," she said. "I know," I replied. Her jaw tightened, like she expected anger. But I wasn't angry. I was tired. Tired of guessing. Tired of holding back words until they turned into something ugly inside me. She looked up. "I didn't want you to hate me," she said. I let out a short breath. "I didn't hate you," I said. "I hated how easy it was for you to disappear." That landed between us. Her eyes glistened slightly, and she blinked fast like she didn't want to admit it mattered. "I'm not good at being wanted," she whispered. "I spent so long being needed. It's different." I nodded slowly. "I know what that feels like," I said. Being around people all day and still feeling alone. Her shoulders sank, like she'd been holding them up for years. "I shouldn't have called you," she said. "But you did." She stared at me for a long time, and her voice came out smaller than before. "I wanted to hear someone's footsteps coming toward me," she admitted. "Just once." My chest tightened so hard it almost hurt. I took a step closer, careful, like I was approaching something fragile. "I would have come every time," I said honestly. Her breath caught. "That's what scares me," she whispered. She moved too, just a small step forward, closing the space until we were standing close enough that I could feel the warmth of her. Her eyes searched mine like she was looking for proof I didn't know how to give. Zion, she said, voice trembling, you're Ion's friend. I know, and I'm older. I know, and I have made so many choices already, she said. I can't make one more that destroys him. I didn't argue, because she was right, and I hated that she was right. I lifted my hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. My fingers touched her wrist, gentle, not pulling, not claiming, just there. Her skin was warm, human. She closed her eyes for a moment, like she'd been holding her breath for days, and finally let it go. I think about you, she confessed. More than I should. My throat tightened. I nodded once. Me too. Her eyes opened again, wet but steady. Nothing can happen, she said. It wasn't a question. It was a sentence she was forcing herself to survive. I swallowed. Okay, I said. The word came out rough, but real. She looked at me like she didn't believe I'd say it. Then she gave the smallest smile, barely there like it hurt to make. And she reached up, her hand touching my cheek for the first time without hesitation. Not a kiss, not a confession, just her palm resting there like she needed to remember what it felt like to be close to someone who wasn't asking for anything. I leaned into her hand without thinking. She exhaled, and her thumb brushed my skin once. Then she whispered, almost like a prayer, thank you. And I didn't trust my voice, so I just nodded. Because sometimes the most painful thing isn't losing someone. It's choosing not to take them. A month passed. Not the dramatic kind of month where everything changes overnight. Just the quiet kind, where the days keep moving and you realize you're surviving something without ever naming it. Farah didn't return to the hospital for 2 weeks. When she finally did, she came back like nothing had happened. Same calm walk, same clip tone, same clipboard in her hand like it was a shield. But something in her had shifted, and something in me had too. I stopped looking for her in every hallway. Not because I didn't want to, because I learned what it cost her when I did. Ion somehow got better. Not fully, not magically, but he started answering calls again, started eating dinner at home, started complaining about normal things like the Wi-Fi and the hospital food. One day, while we were sitting outside the cafeteria, he said, my mom seems lighter. He didn't know why. I did. I just nodded and said good. And that was the first time I realized how much silence can protect people. Sometimes it's not lying. Sometimes it's mercy. My routine changed too. I stopped going to that cafe every night like a desperate habit. But some mornings, I'd still pass by it before my shift, usually around 8:47 a.m., because my body had memorized the time the way it memorized pain. One morning, I walked in without thinking. Same smell, same low music, same corner seat. And there she was, Farah, sitting alone, holding a cup of black coffee like she was holding on to something small that still belonged to her. She looked up when I entered. For a second, her eyes widened, like she hadn't expected life to bring me back in her line of sight. Then she smiled. Not a big smile, just the kind you give when you're tired, but you're still glad. You walked over slowly. Is this your spot now? I asked. She looked down at the table, then back at me. It always was, she said. You just borrowed it. I sat across from her. No fear this time. No rusing heartbeat. Just the quiet weight of familiarity. The barista came over. Farah didn't even look at the menu. Black coffee, she said. Then she glanced at me. And for him, tea. No sugar. I froze. She remembered. Of course she did. My throat tightened, and I looked away, pretending to adjust my sleeve. You're back, I said softly. She nodded. I'm back. And I yawned. She exhaled, her shoulders loosening a little. He's trying, she said. That's all I ever wanted. I nodded. There was a pause. A long one. The kind where old feelings knock gently, just to remind you they still exist. Farah's fingers circled the rim of her cup, slow and absent. Then she said, barely above a whisper, I still think about that night. I didn't ask which night. We both knew. The parking lot. The street lamp. The almost. I stared at her hands. The same steady hands that didn't always feel steady. I do too, I admitted. She looked at me then. Really looked. No one got hurt, she said. Not completely, I replied. That made her lips twitch. You're still young, she said, almost teasing. You still think pain has to be loud. I leaned back slightly, watching her. And you still think you have to carry everything alone. She didn't deny it. Instead, she reached in her bag and pulled out a small thermos. She placed it on the table between us. It was plain, silver, nothing special, but it felt like a symbol of something we'd built without touching it too hard. I started bringing tea from home, she said. Hospital tea tastes like regret. I laughed under my breath. She smiled properly this time. Warm, human. And then, under the table, her foot nudged mine. Not an accident, not a mistake, just a quiet choice. I didn't move away. Neither did she. Outside the cafe window, the city moved the same way it always did. Cars, people, morning sunlight hitting the street like it had places to be. But inside, time felt softer, earned. Farah's eyes stayed on me for a moment longer than they should have. And in that look, there was no guilt, no fear, just something steady, like she'd finally stopped running from her own loneliness. She leaned forward slightly and said, almost casually, "You can come by after your shift today, if you want." My chest tightened, not with panic this time, but with something like relief. I nodded once. "Okay," I said, and she smiled like that word meant more than any confession ever could. Because it wasn't a promise of forever. It was just two tired people choosing to stop pretending they didn't need warmth. And somehow, that was enough. Did this story stay with you? What kind of quiet, real love stories do you want to hear next?